What happens when a guy, full of his own arrogance, chooses to openly shame the woman who sacrificed so much for him? He was there, encircled by supposed buddies, chuckling while he labeled his former spouse as penniless and dull. He viewed her as a relic from his history, a discarded page in his rise to success. He had no clue she was on the verge of turning into the most terrifying specter of his tomorrow. What he missed, only yards away, was a luxurious $500,000 Rolls-Royce pulling up smoothly to the sidewalk. And in the following minute, the lady who emerged, accompanied by one of the planet's most influential figures, wouldn't merely crush his arrogance. She would obliterate his whole existence. Join us as we reveal the astonishing real account of Elena Brooks. The divorce documents termed it an irreversible collapse. For Elena Brooks, that formal term was a ridiculous minimization. Her union hadn't simply fallen apart. It had been methodically torn down, bit by bit, by the man she had once vowed to cherish eternally, Marcus Reed. Their shared existence had been scripted in his style. When they first encountered each other, Elena was a talented literature graduate, receiving entry-level editor positions from two renowned publishing houses. Marcus was an entry-level consultant with a grin that could peddle ice to polar bears and a drive that raged like a wildfire. He had sketched a captivating vision for her. "Allow me to solidify my position," he had murmured, his palm on her face. "Just a couple of years. Back me up now, and once I'm a director, the universe is yours. You can start your own bookstore. We'll explore the globe. You won't have to report to anybody." She trusted him. She accepted a steady, unassuming role in college management, with adaptable schedules and solid perks, so she could accommodate his extended evenings, organize his business gatherings, and refine his reports. She channeled her smarts not into book reviews, but into enhancing his image, making him appear more clever and refined. Her aspiration was postponed, stowed neatly on a distant ledge to be retrieved someday, but that day never arrived. As Marcus ascended the ranks at the New York investment company Whitaker & Crow, his outfits became pricier and his praises grew scarcer. Her reliable backing, once his foundation, was now a groove. Her enthusiasm for literature, once captivating, was now a tedious pastime. The ultimate strike occurred when he declared he was abandoning her for a 24-year-old social media star named Brittany Lane, a lady whose main addition to society was uploading self-portraits with high-end product tags. The split was harsh and rapid. Marcus, backed by his elite attorneys, claimed that Elena hadn't added money in ages. He depicted her as a parasite, a basic lady without motivation. He kept the expansive Upper East Side loft, the investments, the elite club access. She received her humble reserves, a second-hand Toyota, and a mandated support payment that was barely sufficient to offend. A year and a half on, Elena was enduring the existence Marcus had engineered for her without him, the existence of a destitute and unexciting lady. She resided in a tiny studio flat in Greenwich Village, the heaters whistling in the cold months, and the wall unit cooling system clattering in the warm ones. The lively, determined lady had diminished, supplanted by a specter who lingered on the edges of her own world. She served as a distant literary analyst for a school on the West Coast, a position that covered expenses but famished her essence. Her reality had contracted to the dimensions of her computer display. The peak of her 7 days was touring the Metropolitan Museum of Art, not as an editor, but as an admission-paying visitor. She would linger for 60 minutes before a Van Gogh's Starry Night, immersing herself in the swirling hues, countless small strokes that somehow unified to form something complete and stunning. It symbolized the existence she believed she could no longer pursue. She sensed like one of those strokes, separated, tiny, and insignificant alone. One brisk November day, a heavy ivory-hued letter showed up in her postbox. It distinguished itself among the invoices and spam like a robin amid sparrows. Her name and location were inscribed in graceful script. It was an invite to the yearly St. Mary's Charity Ball, the top affair of the New York social calendar, hosted at the historic Carnegie Hall. Her initial reaction was to chuckle. It was a mean prank. She and Marcus had gone annually. It was his platform. He'd sweep through the space, slapping shoulders, guffawing excessively, with her following quietly after, an attractive but subdued ornament. The invite was clearly an administrative mistake, a remnant from an outdated contact list. She was prepared to discard it when a frigid anger, a feeling she hadn't experienced in weeks, stung her core. She pictured Marcus there with Brittany attached to his limb. She could hear his arrogant tone presenting his upgraded existence to his associates. She could envision their sympathetic stares if they spotted her, the rejected spouse. The idea was revolting. She flung the invite onto her compact kitchen surface, a bright white square on the faded laminate. For 3 days, it remained there, taunting her. Discard it, her thoughts yelled. It's a summons to your own disgrace. But on the 4th day, something altered. As she gazed at her image in the dim monitor, she no longer saw a phantom. She saw a captive, and she understood that Marcus wasn't merely her former partner. He was her jailer, and her jail was the humiliation he had so skillfully erected around her. He still dominated her, even remotely. The dread of encountering him, of being evaluated by him, was merely another barrier in her enclosure. An odd, unknown determination started to surge from deep inside her. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about recovery. She grabbed her device, her finger lingering over a contact she hadn't used in almost 12 months, a label that signified a realm she thought she had abandoned eternally. She inhaled deeply, the atmosphere tasting of grime and old tea, and tapped dial. "Victor," she stated, her tone slightly unsteady. "It's Elena Brooks. I realize this is unexpected, but I have an offer for you, and I require assistance." On the opposite side, in a simple high-rise overlooking the Hudson River, the withdrawn software tycoon Victor Lang, a figure who hadn't shown up at a communal gathering in half a decade, grinned. "Elena," he replied, his tone steady and kind. "I was curious when you'd reach out. Share everything with me." Victor Lang was a legend in the realms of technology and banking. He had invented Nexus, an information integration system so groundbreaking it had transformed international supply chains, turning him into a multi-billionaire prior to turning 30. But unlike his contemporaries who acquired athletic squads and enormous vessels, Victor had withdrawn. He despised the glare, deeming the superficial pomp of the super-wealthy to be mind-numbingly monotonous. His real interest, the one area he invested his wealth in, was books. He wasn't a gatherer in the conventional way. He was a guardian, a virtual curator. He had initially met Elena Brooks, not face-to-face, but via her writings. 2 years prior to her separation, while she was still stuck in her managerial position, Elena had devoted her nights and free days to composing an extensive scholarly article. It was a sharp, insightful examination of the deterioration of Victorian-era manuscripts, suggesting a bold, fresh approach for electronic repair using forecasting models grounded in material makeup. She sent it to a specialized literary preservation periodical, never anticipating a reply. Victor, a keen follower of such publications, stumbled upon her piece. He was astounded. It wasn't merely the concept. It was the grace of her writing, the intense cleverness that shone through the thick scholarly terms. He perceived an intellect that linked varied areas, literature, science, information, in a manner he had only fantasized about. He contacted her through the school email noted in the author line, conveying his respect and posing some technical inquiries. Elena, astonished to get a message from the famed Victor Lang, had responded with a thorough, eager answer. An exchange commenced. It was strictly businesslike, a convergence of two formidable brains, but it was the most mentally invigorating bond Elena had known in years. For a few hours weekly, composing messages to Victor, she wasn't Marcus Reed's partner. She was Elena Brooks, the expert. When Marcus discovered the messages, he'd been scornful. Some geek enthusiast, so concentrate on what's important. Mrs. Whitaker's outdoor event is upcoming. I need you to enchant her. The interaction had lessened as her union descended into its concluding bitter end. Following the split, adrift and directionless, Elena hadn't considered contacting him. She was too embarrassed. What did she express? The exceptional individual you believed I was has vanished. I'm simply a separated woman in an inexpensive flat now. But Victor hadn't overlooked. He had his staff quietly investigate her circumstances. He discovered the separation, the manner Reed had discarded her. It violated his notion of fairness. Ability like hers, he thought, was an asset more precious than any product, and to witness it wasted by a short-sighted idiot like Marcus Reed was an offense. So, when she eventually phoned, he was prepared. An offer and assistance, Victor echoed, his tone free of astonishment. I'm all ears. Elena clarified, her tone strengthening as she proceeded. She described the ball, her original apprehension, and her fresh-found grit. The assistance is, I was hoping you could join me. I know you avoid these occasions, and it's a ridiculous request, but I'll be present, he stated without pause. The offer, this was the challenging portion. This was the jump. Your enterprise, Lang Enterprises, possesses the computing capability. I hold the technique. Jointly, we could construct the planet's most sophisticated book safeguarding repository, a virtual repository of knowledge for the globe's classics. We could establish a charitable organization, the Lang Brooks Repository, to finance and oversee it. This ball, it's the ideal spot to reveal it. It's packed with supporters, library heads, the exact individuals we require involved. There was an extended quiet on the connection. Elena's pulse pounded in her chest. She had exceeded boundaries. It was excessive, too hasty. Elena, Victor stated at last, and she could detect the grin in his tone. I've had a group of 50 technicians attempting to solve the real-world use of your article for the past half-year. They've advanced minimally. I didn't wish to introduce a weak version of your concept. I desired the creator. I wasn't merely going to be your companion at the ball. I was already set to travel to New York next week to propose you the role of head of the whole initiative. Elena collapsed on her tired couch, the device clamped firmly to her ear. Tears formed in her eyes, but they weren't of sorrow or disgrace. They were of sheer, pure liberation. Someone recognized her. Someone had recognized her throughout. The subsequent 10 days were a frenzy. Victor's group arrived, not with compassion, but with intent. A premium computer and secure systems were set up in her flat. Agreements were rushed and authorized. A lady named Clara, Victor's steadfast head assistant, contacted her. Mr. Lang has organized attire for the ball. Elena, Clara stated in a sharp, professional manner, a fashion expert will arrive at your flat tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We have also arranged a room at the Waldorf Astoria for the evening of the occasion. It will be simpler to prepare there. Elena was swamped. Clara, this is excessive. I can't take Elena. Clara interrupted softly. You are the head of the Lang Brooks Repository. This is not a private present. It is a business cost. You are symbolizing the organization. You must appear appropriate. The fashion expert, a stylish lady named Mia, came with mobile displays of luxury outfits. She didn't attempt to alter Elena into another person. Rather, she appeared to perceive the lady who had been concealed. You possess a traditional allure, Mia pondered, raising a sample of rich emerald fabric, like a Dickens character. We should embrace that, refined, enduring, potent. They selected an outfit by a lesser-known but remarkably elegant creator, a pillar of deep green velvet that flowed over her form with a lone striking fold of material over one arm. It was subtle, yet completely authoritative. It was the garment of a lady who didn't require glitter to glow. As the date of the ball neared, Elena sensed a massive change inside her. The anxiety lingered, a faint buzz in the distance, but it was being overwhelmed by an ascending chorus of thrill and direction. She devoted hours to virtual meetings with Victor and his group, developing the introduction plan. Her intellect, so long inactive, was operating at full capacity. She felt vibrant. The evening prior to the ball, she was assembling a bag for the night in her flat when she discovered an ancient picture collection hidden in a storage space. She opened it. There was an image of her and Marcus from their third celebration, positioned outside a eatery. He was radiant, his limb possessively encircling her middle. She appeared joyful, but her grin didn't fully extend to her gaze. She was an adornment, a charming, well-maintained item. She shut the collection and returned it to the storage. That lady was no more. Tomorrow evening, she wouldn't be an adornment to anyone. She was the primary display. Marcus Reed examined his image in the gold-bordered reflector of his loft. His bespoke formal wear suited him like an extension of his body. His fresh Rolex timepiece, a buy he couldn't truly manage but deemed vital, sparkled beneath the inset illumination. Tonight mattered. Whitaker and Crow had been losing accounts, and a recent dangerous venture he'd promoted had failed catastrophically. He needed to display achievement more than before. The St. Mary's Charity Ball wasn't merely a celebration. It was a pursuit area for fresh funds, a location to mend his somewhat damaged standing. "Mark, does this effect make me appear more tanned or more yellow?" Brittany Lane shouted from a sitting area, her visage lit by her device screen. She was crammed into a flashy silver-beaded outfit that revealed much. "You look fantastic, honey," he replied without pivoting. He fixed his neckwear, his thoughts on his goals for the night. Harlan Fitzgerald, the property magnate, and Jonathan Lee, the investment overseer. He needed 5 minutes with each. Saw the idea for a novel, unbeatable portfolio he was assembling. "I can't wait for all to witness us," Brittany stated now, rehearsing her sulk in the reflector. "That journalist from New York Vibes will be present. We require an ideal photo." Recall what occurred to Elena that one year when she dripped champagne on Councilman Doyle's spouse. "Goodness, that was so mortifying for you." Marcus grinned at the recollection. Elena was from a different time. Kind, but uninteresting, no spark. She fit an archive, not a grand hall. He experienced a known surge of contentment. Departing her had been the finest choice he'd ever taken. It was like exchanging a dependable but outdated car for a shiny new racer. Brittany was showy. She was entertaining. She appeared great on his limb, and even superior on social media. She was a resource. As they descended the lift to the awaiting sedan, his device vibrated. It was a debt notice from his agent. A chilly lump formed in his belly. He swiftly erased the note and compelled a grin. Tonight must succeed. Meanwhile, across the city at the Waldorf Astoria, Elena was experiencing a distinct sort of change. The hotel accommodation was bigger than her whole flat, with sweeping vistas of the metropolis she had once felt so misplaced in. Mia, the fashion expert and a silent, skilled hair and cosmetics specialist, labored with serene productivity. As they operated, Elena was on a concluding preparation discussion with Victor, who had arrived that day on his personal aircraft. "The presentation is arranged." Victor's tone emerged through her earpieces, stable and comforting. "At 9:30 p.m., the ball leader, Mr. Harrison, will yield the platform to me for a unique declaration. I'll address for 2 minutes. Then I'll present you as the head and innovator behind the initiative. You'll utter a few remarks. We'll disclose the entry page for the organization's site, and then we handle inquiries. Straightforward. Straightforward for you, perhaps," Elena replied, an anxious chuckle slipping out. "You'll be outstanding, Elena. Just convey your outlook. Speak sincerely. The remainder is merely distraction." When the setups were finished, Elena positioned before the tall reflector. The lady gazing back was unfamiliar, yet more authentic than she had been in 10 years. The deep green outfit was a work of art and design, suggesting a vigor she was just reawakening. Her locks were gathered in a refined twist, and her cosmetics was understated, highlighting the wisdom in her hazel eyes. She donned a lone item of adornment borrowed for the night, a fine pearl chain that murmured instead of proclaimed its worth. Clara rapped gently on the entrance. "Mr. Lang awaits you below, Elena. The vehicle is prepared." Inhaling deeply, Elena exited the accommodation and toward the lift. With every stride, she sensed the phantoms of her former existence, the disgrace, the doubt, the sensation of being inferior fading away. She wasn't Marcus Reed's dreary former spouse anymore. She was Elena Brooks, head executive, and she was heading to business. The journey to Carnegie Hall was peaceful. Victor, attired in a flawlessly fitted black ensemble without a neckwear, a subtle defiance, detected her anxiety. "Recall that manuscript you discussed?" he inquired, his tone soft. "The one in London by Hawthorne. You explained how the repairers had to meticulously remove generations of dirt and awkward retouches to expose the authentic gem beneath." Elena affirmed, grasping his meaning. "Tonight," he stated, his gaze meeting hers, "you are not exposing a fresh work. You are merely displaying the gem that existed all along." As their vehicle, a understated but commanding black Mercedes, entered the line of cars outside the site, Elena observed a known black Porsche just in front. She recognized it as belonging to Edward Harrington, a top executive at Marcus's company. Her pulse fluttered slightly in nervousness. He was present. He was nearby. The ultimate challenge was imminent. The gateway to Carnegie Hall was a managed tempest of blinking flashes, parking aids, and New York's upper class. Marcus Reed, with Brittany glued to his flank, exited his rented Ferrari and promptly started to act. He gestured to a cameraman he recognized, exchanged a boisterous, robust chuckle with a peer investor, and skillfully directed Brittany toward the crimson path. He was in his domain. He felt dominant, respected. He noticed Harlan Fitzgerald near the majestic steps and noted mentally to catch him after the toast with bubbly. All was proceeding as intended. Marcus, see, Brittany murmured, poking him with her joint. She indicated a tiny roped-off zone where journalists were doing talks. It's that online writer Big Apple buzz. Her entries receive like 1 billion hits. Marcus's gaze tracked her direction. He spotted the writer, but he also spotted who she was conversing with, his former co-worker, Thomas Whitaker, and his partner. He directed Brittany toward them, a hunter's grin on his visage. This was an excellent chance to dominate. "Tom, buddy, you appear sharp," Marcus thundered, slapping Thomas on the rear a bit excessively. And Carla, gorgeous as ever. After the required cheek pecks and hollow flattery, Thomas bent in. "So, Mark, haven't encountered you since the acquisition discussions." Heard matters became a tad unstable. Marcus dismissed with a wave. "Mere illusions, Tom. You understand the game. You must expend a gain." He needed to shift the topic. And then he spotted her. Positioned close to the less busy visitor registration, nearly concealed behind a stone column, was Elena. She was by herself. From this range, he couldn't discern the specifics of her attire, only that it was somber and plain. She appeared precisely as he envisioned her, misplaced, a bystander at the year's largest gathering. A wave of spiteful compassion surged through him. How pitiful. Did she arrive hoping to bump into him to induce remorse? "Oh goodness. Is that Elena?" Brittany stated, her tone oozing fake compassion. "She appears so melancholic. And what is she dressed in?" This was his opportunity. With his listeners of Thomas, Carla, and Brittany attentive to his every utterance, Marcus allowed the grin he'd been restraining to finally dominate his face. He reduced his tone to a secretive, dramatic murmur, just audible enough for those nearby to catch plainly. "I nearly pity her," he started, shaking his cranium gradually. "When we were wed, I attempted to engage her in existence, but she was always content with her musty ancient volumes." He snickered, a harsh, patronizing noise. "I'm pleased she's ventured out, I suppose, but some folks just aren't suited for this realm. She's a nice lady, but frankly completely penniless and dull." Carla Whitaker fidgeted uneasily, but Thomas, a guy akin to Marcus, snickered too. Brittany gripped his limb. "You're overly kind, Mark. You provided her a wonderful existence." "I attempted," Marcus stated with a concluding generous exhale. "But you can't transform an archivist into a tigress." He felt a surge of dominance. He had characterized her. He had returned her to the container he'd fashioned for her. He was Marcus Reed, the giant of banking, and she was his sorrowful, overlooked initial spouse. The tale was firm. Elena had been awaiting the message from Clara to indicate they were ready to proceed. She had intentionally stayed back from the primary crowd, seizing an instant to calm her jitters, and then she overheard it, his voice. It sliced through the surrounding babble of the foyer like a fragment of crystal. She didn't need to view him to realize he was discussing her. The belittling inflection, the pretended compassion, the precise hurtful terms penniless and dull. The terms resonated in the vast chamber, but they felt like they were being murmured straight into her ear. For a brief instant, the former Elena re-emerged. The humiliation flooded over her, scorching and stifling. Her primary urge was to pivot to escape, to dash back to the vehicle and conceal. The jail entrance he had constructed was closing once more. But then something different transpired. The warmth of humiliation was immediately evaporated by the blazing heat of pure, unfiltered fury. Not merely fury at Marcus, but fury at herself for ever permitting this guy such authority over her. Dull, she had argued 19th-century book collectors with one of the most exceptional intellects on earth. Penniless, she was about to turn into the head of a multi-million-dollar organization that would alter the globe. He hadn't simply aired about her. He was residing in an entirely separate truth. He was a guy yelling at a silhouette, totally unaware of the individual she had evolved into. And in that instant, all her dread disappeared. It was supplanted by a freezing composure. This wasn't her ordeal. It was his. She noticed a parking aide, a youthful guy with a gentle countenance, gazing at her with worry, having caught Marcus's remark. Elena offered him a tiny, nearly unnoticeable grin, a quiet recognition. Then she gazed beyond him toward the primary gateway as a text alert buzzed in her compact purse. It was from Clara. It held a solitary term, now. Elena aligned her posture, raised her jaw, and advanced one pace from behind the column into the illumination. Just as Marcus concluded his declaration, a fresh vibe spread through the entry foyer. The hectic vigor of the photographers, which had started to diminish, abruptly intensified with a renewed, nearly manic force. The bursts weren't merely occasional anymore. They were a firm, dazzling barrier of brightness. A whisper circulated through the assembly, a surge of murmurs and stretched necks. "What's happening?" Brittany inquired, irritated that the focus had moved from them. Marcus, annoyed by the disruption, glanced toward the curb. A car was arriving, but it wasn't an ostentatious Ferrari or a vintage Cadillac. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, elongated and smooth, coated in a bespoke hue of obsidian that appeared to absorb the glow. It was a vehicle that didn't need to be noisy to declare its proprietor's riches. Its quietness was its declaration. Likely some ancient fortune relic, Marcus grumbled, pivoting back to Thomas. But Thomas wasn't attending. He, like all others, was fixated on the Rolls-Royce. The chauffeur, an expert in a neat ensemble, swiftly unlocked the back traveler door. A single flawlessly shined brogue emerged, followed by a guy who extended himself in the car with effortless poise. He was high and slender, his somber ensemble customized to flawlessness. He wore no neckwear. Even from 50 feet distant, there was an undeniable atmosphere of authority about him. But it was a silent, contained authority, not the showy boldness Marcus depended on. "Heavens," Thomas Whitaker exhaled, his tone filled with reverence. "Is that Victor Lang?" Marcus's vitality chilled. Victor Lang, the legendary tech recluse here at the St. Mary's Charity Ball. It was improbable, yet feasible. The guy hadn't been captured in communal for years. Marcus's thoughts sped, attempting to compute the perspective. Was Lang's enterprise a fresh backer? Was he executing a purchase? Victor Lang didn't even peek at the shouting media. He merely pivoted back to the open entrance and offered his palm, and then moments seemed to decelerate. A lady's palm, refined and plain, except for the deep green of her fingernails, accepted his. She exited the car, not like a celebrity, but like a sovereign. The deep green velvet of her outfit cascaded around her, a sharp, breathtaking opposition to the tacky beads and vibrant shades that packed the space. Her locks were gathered up, her neck elongated and elegant, decorated with the gentle sparkle of a pearl chain. She rotated her cranium toward the light, and a shared inhale went through the spectators. It was Elena, but it wasn't the Elena they recognized. It wasn't the timid, remorseful academic partner or the melancholic separated Lady Marcus had just portrayed. This was a lady who exuded her assurance so deep it was nearly disturbing. Her demeanor was peaceful, her stance ideal. She gazed straight forward, her gaze composed and concentrated. Marcus felt as if he had been struck in the abdomen. His mind couldn't handle the sight. The Elena he retained in his thoughts, the penniless and dull lady, simply could not coexist with the image of authority and refinement now advancing toward him. The dual truths were ripping his view apart. Is she with him? Brittany faltered, her own meticulously built mask fracturing. The social media star abruptly appeared, inexpensive and frantic beside Elena's eternal poise. Victor Lang positioned a gentle, deferential palm on the base of Elena's spine and led her toward the gateway. They progressed as a pair, a quiet, impressive duo. The ocean of individuals divided for them naturally. The ball leader, a stout, significant guy named Mr. Harrison, hurried ahead, his countenance radiant. "Mr. Lang, what an amazing privilege. We had no notion you were arriving," he effused. Victor grinned courteously. "Appreciate you for hosting us, Edward," he stated, his tone projecting effortlessly. Then he motioned to Elena. "And Kindly permit me to present my associate, Elena Brooks. He didn't say my companion or my paramour. He said associate. The term lingered in the atmosphere, loaded with meaning. They passed by Marcus's tiny cluster without a spark of awareness. Elena's gaze didn't even brush him. To her, he was merely part of the backdrop, as trivial as a planted shrub. The wound was so profound, so total it was more ruinous than any yelling dispute or communal clash could ever have been. It wasn't animosity. It was apathy. It was deletion. Thomas Whitaker gaped, stunned from the glowing Elena to the pale Marcus. He gradually took a pace away from his former associate, as if closeness might be infectious. Marcus remained immobile, his bubbly glass midway to his mouth. The arrogant grin was absent, replaced by a loose-mouthed veil of incredulity and emerging terror. In the duration of 30 seconds, his whole universe had been inverted. The lady he had just openly marked as a wretched flop had arrived with one of the wealthiest, most mysterious men on earth, appearing not like his abandoned history, but like everybody's tomorrow. The tale hadn't just been disputed, it had been destroyed, and in its stead, a horrifying fresh query started to shape in his thoughts. What else was he unaware of? The majestic grand room of Carnegie Hall was a cosmos of sparkling, bubbly, and meticulously nurtured influence. Marcus Reed staggered through it like a phantom. He had misplaced Brittany somewhere close to the caviar station, her prattle about obtaining a self-portrait with a Tycoon dissolving into the ambient din of his own thundering alarm. He observed from behind a stone pillar as Elena and Victor Lang were individually led to the primary table where they sat with Mr. Harrison, Governor Ellis, and other notables he could only aspire to connect with. Elena was radiant. She chuckled at something the governor mentioned, her countenance lively and wise. She wasn't merely positioned there. She was maintaining her position among giants. The spectacle was a bodily agony to Marcus. Every assured motion she executed, every deferential affirmation she got from the folks at her table was a spike in the casket of his superiority. At 9:30 as planned, Mr. Harrison ascended the platform. After the standard appreciations, his tone adopted a fresh degree of enthusiasm. And now, everyone, we have a very unique surprise visitor this evening. He is a pioneer who has remodeled the electronic realm, and this evening he is here to disclose a fresh outlook with us. It is my great honor to greet Mr. Victor Lang. A tide of cheers and thrilled whispers swept the space. Marcus felt a chilly perspiration on his forehead. Victor Lang proceeded to the lectern with the identical silent assurance he had displayed all night. "Appreciate you, Edward. Appreciate you all," Victor commenced. "I'm not typically one for communal addresses. I favor facts to social dinners. But I'm present this evening because we are at crossroads. For ages, our finest literary prizes have been vulnerable to time, conflict, and decline. Classics disappear, weaken, and are gone eternally. We think innovation can alter that." He halted, permitting the gravity of his statements to settle. "For the previous year, my enterprise has been laboring to construct a novel type of establishment, a charitable organization committed to forming a full, globally reachable, electronic repository of the globe's most vital literary works utilizing groundbreaking scanning and safeguarding innovation. This evening, I am delighted to declare the creation of a Lang Brooks repository." The title struck Marcus like a tangible hit. Lang Brooks. Not just her companion, not just her escort. Her title was on the banner, right beside the Tycoon's. But a notion is only as valuable as the intellect that devises it. Victor proceeded, his tone echoing with authentic respect. "And the structural outlook, the brilliance behind this whole approach, does not pertain to me. It pertains to an expert of remarkable ability and foresight. It is my unique privilege to present the establishing head of the Lang Brooks repository, Miss Elena Brooks." He pivoted and motioned to Elena. The highlight located her as she arose from her chair and advanced to the lectern. The whole space was hushed, entranced. "Appreciate you, Victor," she commenced, her tone distinct and firm with no hint of the anxious lady he had once known. "Books are not an extravagance. They are our shared recollection. They are the narrative of our identity. For too long that narrative has been vulnerable." She addressed for 5 minutes, but in that period she depicted an image of the future so persuasive so ingenious that the whole space was mesmerized. She discussed books, facts, and heritage with a zeal and wisdom that was astonishing. This was not the dull lady who perused volumes. This was a pioneer, a guide. When she concluded, the space burst into resounding cheers. Individuals were standing. Library overseers, donors, and financiers were already clustering, their thrill evident. Marcus felt like he was choking. He retreated from the pillar and stumbled toward the terrace, frantic for oxygen. He tore his neckwear off, his torso constricted. It was all a falsehood. His whole view of their union, of her, was a fabrication he had composed to comfort his own pride. She hadn't been dull. She had been uninterested. Uninterested in him, uninterested in the narrow, smothering container he had placed her in. He was reclining against the railing, attempting to regain his respiration, when a voice addressed from behind him. Quite a reversal, isn't it, Reed? It was Edward Harrison, the ball leader, grasping 2 tumblers of scotch. He passed one to Marcus. I had no notion. Marcus stuttered. Harrison took a gradual sip of his beverage, his gaze locked on the grand room, where Elena was now, encircled by fans. You know, it's an amusing matter. I recall her from years past. She sought the chief editor role at the Museum of Modern Art. Her application crossed my workstation. She was by a broad margin the most ingenious applicant we had encountered in 10 years. Marcus's pulse halted. He recalled that. Elena had been so thrilled, laboring on her submission for weeks. She'd been a contender. We were going to propose her the position. Harrison proceeded, his tone turning icy. But then we received a contact from you. Marcus gazed at him, his thoughts utterly vacant. What? You contacted my forerunner, Paul Simmons. You informed him that you were about to receive a major advancement, and that Elena had resolved she wanted to concentrate on beginning a household. You said she was pulling back her application to bolster your profession, and that she was no longer eager for that sort of labor. You said she'd be happier as a spouse and parent. You requested him to maintain the discussion private to spare her the mortification. Harrison shook his cranium in revulsion. We deemed it strange, but we honored what we believed were her desires. We employed our secondary option. The recollection, intentionally interred for years, surged back to Marcus with nauseating sharpness. He had executed that contact. He'd been frightened that if she obtained the position, she would outshine him. Her realm would become larger, more thrilling than his. She would possess her own authority, her own links. She might not require him anymore. So, in a solitary timid act of undermining, he had severed her the legs to guarantee she stayed in his shade. You didn't just separate from her, Reed. Harrison stated, his tone infused with disdain as he assembled the fragments. You crippled her profession out of trivial envy. And now observe her. He motioned with his tumbler toward the grand room. Turns out you can't suppress an intellect like that eternally. The only element that ever restrained her was you. Harrison completed his scotch, placed the vacant tumbler on the barrier, and departed, leaving Marcus solitary in the chilly evening breeze. The ultimate explosion had happened. It wasn't just his arrogance that was fragmented. It was his whole self-perception. He wasn't the protagonist of his own narrative. He was the antagonist, and he had just observed his sufferer ascend from the remnants he had generated, more potent and ingenious than he could ever have conceived. The dawn after the ball, Marcus Reed awoke to the harsh blaze of daylight penetrating his loft's tall panes. His cranium pounded a persistent, steady rhythm against his head. For a brief, compassionate instant, he thought the occurrences of the prior evening were a tension-caused horror, a hideous illusion concocted by his worried thoughts. Then he spotted his formal where tossed on a seat like a deceased man's hide, and the recollection returned with the intensity of a bodily collision. He groped for his device, his finger trembling as he activated it. The display was a danger zone. His updates, normally packed with economic reviews and investment advice, were controlled by one account. Wall Street Journal, The Rebirth of Charity. How Victor Lang and Elena Brooks Will Transform Literature. Reuters, Lang Brooks Repository Initiates with $500 million starting fund, disrupting the charitable field. New York Vibes. The exact outlet Brittany had been so eager to appear and published a effusive biography under the title, The Lady Who Was Concealed Openly. The Revelation of Elena Brooks. He browsed rapidly, his respiration snagging in his throat. They lauded her wisdom, her composure, her pioneering suggestion. They dubbed her the literary realm's fresh force. He hunted for his own title, a frantic necessity to see himself recognized in the tale. He located it interred deep in the 7th section of the New York Vibes piece. It stated, Miss Brooks, an ingenious scholar whose prior profession was allegedly halted for her former union to intermediate banking supervisor Marcus Reed, is now set to become one of the most impactful personalities in worldwide books and heritage. Intermediate supervisor. The two terms were execution order. In his domain, ranks were all. The expression was a communal downgrade, an intentional and exquisitely harsh rejection of his whole persona. He had devoted a decade scrambling upward, fashioning an image of authority and sway. And in a solitary dawn, Elena and her Tycoon associate had wiped it all with two terms. The authentic horror started when he entered the workplaces of Whitaker and Crow at 10 o'clock. The instant he exited the lift, he could sense it. The atmosphere was altered. The typical rowdy vigor of the dealing area was muted. Folks quieted as he went by. His associates, men he had shared beverages and private laughs with just days prior, abruptly found the designs on the flooring deeply captivating. They wouldn't encounter his gaze. He was no longer a hunter in the wilderness. He was an injured creature, and the group was rejecting him. Edward Harrington, the company's most veteran executive, and a guy Marcus had devoted years attempting to captivate, was awaiting him in his workspace. Harrington didn't suggest he sit. He positioned by the pane, his rear to Marcus, gazing out over the metropolis. I got a contact this dawn from Edward Harrison, Harrington stated, his tone perilously composed. He was vivid about your behavior at the ball. Both your communal remarks concerning your former spouse and the account of your previous meddling in her profession. Edward, that's a misinterpretation. A personal issue. Marcus started, his tone raspy. Harrington ultimately pivoted, and his countenance was stone. A personal issue, Marcus? Whitaker and Crow has its title on a section of that museum. We value ourselves on honesty. You didn't just embarrass yourself. You acted in a way so shameful, so deeply immoral that it impacts every individual in this company. You undermined an ingenious lady's profession out of pure, pitiful pride. He halted, allowing the statements to linger in the atmosphere like toxin. And additionally, your dangerous portfolio just cost us $7 million. Your occupational discernment is as insolvent as your morals. The option was plain and savage. Step down by midday with a meager payout and a strict secrecy pact, or be dismissed for reason with a complete public review of his catastrophic deals. By 11:45 a.m., Marcus Reed was transporting his occupation in a paper container, exiting the structure he once believed he would someday command. He reached home to discover the loft in a condition of disordered turmoil. Costly luggage was open on the ground, packed with Brittany's luxury garments and footwear. She was on the device with her parent, her rear to him. I understand, Mother. It's a total catastrophe. He's a complete phony. My image can't endure this type of disgrace. She disconnected and ultimately confronted him. Her demeanor not of melancholy or empathy, but of pure, animalistic rage. Do you have any concept what you've caused? She yelled, her tone piercing. We're a farce. That Big Apple buzzwriter is already composing about the arrogant investor and his social media mannequin girlfriend who got humbled. My audience is declining. My backers are contacting me. You were supposed to be on my pass upward. Mark, not a weight, pulling me down to the depths. Brittany, we can overcome this. He implored. We, she chuckled. A harsh, unattractive noise. There is no we. I'm not sinking with your failing vessel. She directed a flawlessly groomed digit at him. You know what the actual issue is, Mark? You're not upset that you were harsh to Elena. You're just upset that you failed. You don't wager on failures. And right now, you are the largest failure in New York. She closed her final luggage, the noise reflecting the conclusiveness of her statements. She didn't even glance back as she exited the entrance, leaving him solitary in the memorial to an existence that was no longer his. The ensuing weeks were a gradual, painful drain. The debt demands he had disregarded arrived with retribution. The sale was quick and pitiless. First the loft, then the rented Ferrari, then the timepiece he'd been so proud of. His alleged companions vanished. Contacts went to recording. Messages went unreturned. He was a communal outcast. He wound up in a duplex garden-style complex in Yonkers, outskirts he used to overlook without consideration. The flat reeked of moist flooring and the remnants of others' botched meals. His vista was of a fractured lot and a shared waste bin. The quiet was the harshest aspect. It was a dense, choking cover interrupted only by the noise of his own ideas, which revolved ceaselessly around one occurrence, the ball. He relived it repeatedly the instant Elena exited that car, a deity descending from the heavens to deliver verdict on a human who had long forgotten his status. Propelled by a frantic, poisonous blend of self-disgust and a sickly necessity for a ultimate verification of his own collapse, he devoted 2 months descending. Then one day, he searched the location of the Lang Brooks repository. He didn't know what he intended to express or perform, but he knew he had to encounter her one final time. He positioned across the road from the smooth, glass-faced structure, feeling like a phantom haunting a tomorrow he had no role in. He appeared unkempt, misplaced. He observed as individuals hurried in and out, their countenances glowing with vigor and intent. Ultimately, he spotted her. She exited the primary doors, involved in a lively discussion with Victor Lang. They were examining design blueprints on a device, and she was indicating something, her countenance illuminated with a true, effortless grin. It was a grin of absolute satisfaction, a grin he had never, not once, been able to provide her. "Elena," he shouted. His own tone sounded foreign to him, weak and frayed. She halted, her grin diminishing, not into wrath, but into a composed, impartial veil. She pivoted and Victor positioned beside her, his palm resting gently on her limb. He was a silent guardian, a bodily symbol of the reality that she was no longer defenseless. "Marcus," she stated. It was a plain recognition of his existence, nothing further. "I needed to encounter you," he commenced, the terms cascading out in a pitiful surge. "I wanted to express I'm remorseful for everything, for what I uttered that evening. That was just my pride, my dread. But it's the other matter, the contact to the museum. That's the thing I can't. I was frightened, Elena. You were so ingenious, and I was terrified you would abandon me. So I ensured you couldn't. It was atrocious. I was an idiot, a timid person." He ultimately exhausted his terms, positioned before her, stripped of all his previous haughtiness, a destroyed guy admitting his wrongs. Elena attended without disruption, her demeanor indecipherable. When he was done, the quiet extended for a prolonged instant. Before she addressed, her tone balanced and free of spite. "Appreciate you for the regret, Marcus," she stated, and the plain elegance of her terms was more incisive than any affront. "I accept it, but I need you to comprehend that I accept it for my own benefit, not yours. Pardon is the final link I had to sever to be genuinely liberated from the jail you constructed for me." She advanced a small pace. "For 10 years, I permitted your characterization of me to become my truth. When you label me dull, I ceased seeking thrill. When you label my interests a pastime, I handled them as such. The immense sorrow of our union wasn't the separation. It was the gradual, methodical demise of my essence, which I voluntarily joined in because I believed it was the cost of your affection." Her gaze was straightforward, steadfast. "This existence I possess now." She motioned to the structure behind her. "I didn't construct it to spite you. I constructed it on the base of the lady I was before I encountered you, and the lady I became after I departed you. My achievement isn't the antithesis of you. It exists on a level you can't even grasp. It's a collaboration built on shared respect, not on dread and dominance." She offered him a concluding short affirmation, a motion of total rejection. "I hope you discover some tranquility, Marcus. Farewell." She pivoted without a rearward peek and departed with Victor, their discussion resuming as if he were nothing more than a fissure in the walkway they had momentarily traversed. Marcus Reed positioned on the pavement as the metropolis hurried around him, a guy completely unseen. He observed until she vanished from sight, and the complete burden of his truth collapsed. He had labeled her penniless, and in doing so had engineered his own destruction. He had labeled her dull, and in doing so had doomed himself to an existence of empty, purposeless quiet. He had devoted years attempting to construct a kingdom, but he had only succeeded in building a grave, and in the conclusion, he was its only resident. In the conclusion, this wasn't just an account about vengeance. It was an account about recovery. Elena Brooks didn't need to ruin Marcus Reed. His own nature did that for him. Her triumph wasn't arriving in a Rolls-Royce. It was reawakening the lady who was ingenious enough to merit that position. It's a potent reminder that the most harmful views are often the ones we absorb from individuals who are terrified of our own capability. Elena's account demonstrates that sometimes the greatest act of resistance isn't retaliating, but simply evolving into everything they said you couldn't be. What did you think of Elena's astonishing path? Was Marcus's collapse deserved, or did he receive what he merited? Share your opinions in the comments below. We peruse every single one. And if you were motivated by this account and desire more astonishing stories of victory and fairness, ensure you press that thumbs up, distribute this footage with someone who needs to view it, and most crucially, join our channel and activate that alert icon. You won't want to skip what we have upcoming.